Killer in the Forest. When I was quite young, I had a friend named Alex. We would often ride our bikes through a large forest near my house. Aside from the occasional homeless person or person walking a dog, the forest was usually pretty vacant. We always had fun poking around near the swamp and around the small meadows located on the opposite ends of the forest. One day, we were riding our bikes on one of those lesser traversed trails, and we saw a rather odd-looking man walking ahead of us. He appeared to be wearing all black and hiding something under his coat. We found it a little strange that he was walking on the trail that we were on, because practically nobody ever walked down it. But being as young as we were, we quickly forgot about it. We biked past the man, and shortly ahead of him was a lady in a pink dress. She looked a little frazzled and didn't seem to notice us. We passed her as well, and a few minutes later came to a clearing on the opposite side of the forest. We sat on our bikes for a little while and talked. Suddenly, we heard a scream from the trail we had just been on. Then we heard several loud shots. Alex looked at me, wide-eyed, and booked it out of the forest with me close behind. We didn't stop biking until we arrived back at her house. In a frenzy, we told her parents what had happened. They didn't believe us and said it was all our imagination and that we were just overreacting. We were still scared, but hoped they were right. Maybe we did imagine it all. A few days later, there was a report on the news. A woman in a pink dress was found dead in the forest. She had been shot and had been raped and mutilated post-mortem. Alex and I end up talking to the police, but we never got a very good look at the man, so we probably weren't very helpful. As far as I know, the guy was never found. From then on, a few police officers would survey the woods on a daily basis. Let's not meet again. Murderer in the forest. Someone's running around stabbing everybody. I'm an extremely outdoorsy female and love to spend a lot of time in nature. I spent the better half of my early 20s living in remote northern locations and exploring a lot of Alaska, Yukon, and BC. I have many odd, frightening, and bizarre stories that came from my time in the north, and this is one of them. In the summer of 2012, I was 22, I'm 26 now. I was living and working in a pretty remote town in northern British Columbia from May to September. The place I worked at was a campground in a provincial park on the Alaska Highway, 4 hours north of Fort Nelson and 2 hours south of the Yukon and BC border. I feel like it's an incredibly Canadian thing to describe distance and time. The best part about this park was the fact that it had a beautiful natural hot springs, which attracted tourists from all over North America every summer. I lived in an old trailer on a separate part of the campground where the rest of the staff lived. I quickly got used to living in a place where I had no running water, no electricity, no cell phone service, and no internet, and driving 4 hours to Fort Nelson every 2 weeks to get groceries and to do my laundry. Life was pretty sweet. I got to hike, go out for late dips in the springs, make some traveling friends, and spend quality time in nature, getting to know the flora and fauna of the landscape. My job at the campground, park facility operator, which was a general maintenance and cleaning of campsites, gatehouse attendant, wildlife interpreter, and sometimes I had a few security shifts here and there. The feeling of living in the woods was so much different than the feeling of living in a city, as far as safety goes. In the city I'm from, there are people around. You are aware of the fact that your house or apartment can get broken into, but emergency services are quick to respond, and neighbors are also a plus. However, in the woods, I feel more vulnerable. The closest police were 4 hours away, and I lived in a trailer that was run down enough that it could be easily broken into. Plus, it was pretty dark and anyone could sneak around easily at night. I was already on edge sleeping every night. The trailer next to mine was abandoned by the previous manager of the campground after his son had shot himself in the head inside of it. The previous manager had promised numerous times that he would hire a company to drive up from Fort Nelson and tow the trailer away, but that never happened. Not while I lived there, at least, and nobody seemed to care about it too much. I went into the trailer once, saw the blood and brains still on the walls, and never went in again. Back in the 90s, there was also a fatal bear attack at the hot springs. We all had to read the incredibly gruesome and detailed police report about it for our bear-aware training. So yeah, unsettling to say the least. One night, at probably around 2 in the morning, I'm asleep inside my trailer and am woken up to a very loud banging on my trailer door. Reasonably shaken, I look outside the window next to my bed and see a car with its lights on and 2 men standing at my door. I can feel the blood drain from my face. This is the moment I've been scared of the entire summer. Through the door, I say, "How can I help you?" And one of the guys, clearly hammered out of his mind, starts rambling on about something. No matter how hard I try, I cannot understand what he's saying. I say, "Sorry, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me." And the other guy starts frantically trying to explain something in the same drunken state as the first guy. I decide at this point that they don't mean any harm, and I open the door to talk to them. They look visibly shaken, and I can tell they are desperate for my help, but don't have the mental capacity of a person sober enough to coherently tell me what's wrong. One of the dudes starts telling me a very long story that I managed to place together through all his slurring and hiccuping. Basically, he says that him and his friend are on vacation, came up from Fort Nelson to a party, and they had a really long drive. They were at the hot springs, they were having beers, they were sorry about having beers, they weren't drunk, clearly, and then he drops the bomb that somebody is running around the campground, stabbing people. I look at the guy telling me the story, and I notice he has blood all over his clothing. I say, "Someone is going around stabbing people?" And he replies, "Yes, someone's running around stabbing everybody." Then the other guy yells, "Come on, let's go!" And they hop into the aforementioned car and speed off before I can question them anymore. Now I'm standing at my trailer door in the darkness, alone, thinking there's a maniac running around wielding a knife. I have no phone, and I know that the only person who has a phone is the ranger, and his cabin is about a 5-minute walk away from my trailer. I remember that I have a radio, so I run inside my trailer, lock the door, and try to get the ranger on the radio. His radio is off, of course. The only thing I can do at this point is to go to the ranger's cabin and notify him of the situation. I slip out of the trailer and run through the darkness across the maintenance ground, past the creepy suicide trailer, through a thicket, and straight towards the ranger's cabin. Every single noise I hear from the surrounding forest is making my heart pound faster. I keep imagining this maniacal man sneaking through the bushes, entering people's tents, and slashing everybody like it's some bad horror movie. I get to the ranger's cabin and pound on his door. He answers within a few minutes, visibly sleep-deprived, and I tell him the whole story. While I'm there, he calls the police, and they tell him that they're on their way and will be there in 4 hours. The ranger grabs his gun, walks me back to my trailer, and says, "Don't let anybody in." I stay up the rest of the night, listening for any sort of disturbance around me, the intense kind of listening when you're concentrating so hard on any external sounds that might be made, you can almost feel death from the silence. After about 2 hours of doing this, my trailer starts rocking back and forth. I freeze. My heart drops. I can hear the sound of someone breathing extremely heavily, and I'm thinking, this is it. The knife-wielding maniac is going to murder me, and this trailer is going to be another one they'll have to tow away. I'm just sitting there on my bed in my trailer, and it's rocking, waiting for the maniac to stop tormenting me and just break the window and stab me. I'm still listening intently on the heavy breathing, and that's when I hear a grunt, a very non-human sounding grunt. I get a feeling that it's not what I think it is, and I peer out my window of my trailer and see a frickin' bison. It's scratching its back on the side of my trailer, causing it to rock back and forth. Great friggin' timing, bison. The RCMP get there at around 6:30 a.m. and they proceed with their investigation for 10 hours. They close off the springs, and the entire campground turns into an episode of CSI. We don't hear anything about what took place during the night until the investigation is over. Apparently, there was a guy at the springs who made a lewd comment about one of the females in another group, which resulted in an argument. The guy disappeared and returned an hour later with a knife, stabbed 2 of the guys in the group, and booked it back to Fort Nelson, not before stopping at my trailer with his buddy to tell me about the incident, of course. Yeah, one of the guys at my trailer, he was the dude stabbing people. My guess is that him and his friend stopped by my trailer to make it seem like they were innocent, drunken logic. The 2 guys that were stabbed survived, which is good. For many days following this incident, I was cleaning up blood-soaked clothing and rags from random places all over the campground. Knife-wielding maniac, let's not meet again. Green trailer in the middle of the forest. I'm browsing Reddit rather occasionally, so when I found this one, I felt I should share my story. It was 2004. I was 14 back then, and summer holiday just started after my freshman year at middle school ended. I guess middle school is equivalent for how we call it in my country. I met a lot of new kids. Some of them were living in metro area of my city, smaller towns, villages, etc. So there was this one guy whose name was David. You probably know all those middle school crushes where you're too scared and too childish to even hold hands. We were just like that. So he called me like 1 week earlier and invited me to his village, asking to take my bike so we can ride it through the forest. Lovely times when there was no Facebook and barely no broadband internet except for schools. So 1 week later, his father drove to pick me up, introduced himself to my mom, took my bike, and after 1 hour we were at his home. I really liked how the countryside looked like. I've never seen farm animals before, so everything seemed so charming. His family was really nice. His mom gave us a good dinner, and I remember we were watching some DVD movies, and then decided to go biking. So as we were riding our bikes through the forest, we noticed a green trailer, quite far away from the road. It was not a camping trailer. It's actually one of those ones in Poland where it's basically you see on the construction sites or when roads are set up. I guess construction workers put their belongings there while they're doing their stuff. Out of curiosity, we left our bikes nearby and decided to check what was inside this trailer. First thing I remember is the smell. It was awful, sour and putrid, really similar to the smell of vomiting. He pressed against the door and we saw a messy, dirty old couch and a lot of slurs, swearings, and weird drawings on the walls above it. There was also an old dirty cabinet where some food was left to rot, tons of bottles and trash piles, and lots of flies all over the place. So when he got inside, he suddenly turned around with a girlish squeak. I just took a peek, and I've seen some sort of case which was made simply of wooden planks and nails, full of dead animals that resembled cats. Some of them were beheaded. And then I totally freaked out, started screaming, and we run out of this trailer to get our bikes. And now something that traumatized me the most, we heard some sort of whistling from 2 different directions, like there were 2 people trying to communicate with each other, or they were giving some sort of signs. It was scary because I felt like they knew we were at this place. We started running, and the whistling was getting closer and closer. When we got to the main road, we were riding like crazy. All I remember was my heart beating so fast, I could barely hear anything. We got to David's home, and I totally burst into tears, begged his parents to call my mom to pick me up and take me home. So she did, and she also yelled at me after I told her what happened. Honestly, I don't know what the fuck those people were doing in this trailer. Maybe they were some sort of forest hobos, and they were just eating those animals, but I don't know. There was something scary and not right about that trailer. All those weird drawings and writings, and the fact that they were living with dead, rotting cats or whatever it was. And that they were chasing us and trying to communicate with themselves, whistling, which scared me to death. I feel kinda unsettled when I hear whistling at night, and I just turned 26. And yeah, that was my first date.